cooperative extension for any programs? Familiar with cooperative extension? You probably work with Sea Grant, which is kind of like the land.
Yes, but also because I've had citrus virus in my tree, so that they diagnosed that for me.
Oh, okay, excellent, excellent.
No bad.
Cooperative extension is when the university is a public university that was founded in the 1800s. They had three missions: teach students, do science, and bring science to people who need it. So it started out. UH actually started out as the College of Agriculture and Mechanical Arts because they were teaching like manufacturing and they were teaching agriculture. So the bringing the science of what we do in agriculture to people who need it is kind of our mission. We've got offices. I'm based out of Hilo. We have an office in Kainalua, an office in Waimea, and house around the state and such like that. I'm the forester. Most of my colleagues are horticulturalists. They're people who do coffee, and they're people who do fruit and medicine, sweet potatoes, and all kinds of things. People who do livestock, people who do nutrition, and people who do 4-H and stuff like that. I'm the forester statewide. I've been here in Big Island since '98. I've been in Hawaii since 1990. 2 kids, born and raised, graduated Hilo High. So over on our side, off to college now. Actually, they're both back for the summer, which is nice. I work a lot. Okay, we're all here. I keep a database of my clients. About half of my clients are private landowners, such as Cheryl. About half of them are professional foresters. So some professional foresters want to know about the wildlife refuge acquisition plans, which I was able to talk to them about. And about half of the people that I work with are private landowners who are managing their forest. Now, as private landowners, about half of them are growing trees that someday may end up being floors or cabinets or something useful like that. And about half of them are growing native plants because native plants are cool, and they're growing native plants because native plants are cool. For a talk a couple of years ago, I went through my client database and I dropped a tree on the ground. You're not even on there, I don't think. Oh no, maybe you are. Are you down here? Maybe you're one of those. I went through my database and I dropped a tree on the ground for each farm. You know, someone owns 20 acres, 40 acres, 5 acres, whatever. Small forest is managing it for whatever reason they want to manage it. So to get you an idea of, for this island, and I work statewide. I work with people in the Pacific, also Guam, Samoa, Palau, other places. But this is for this island. So some typical tree farms. Here's one on the former cane lands on the Hamakua coast. There are 3 families got together, bought a 17-acre parcel, planted a number of different trees that are going to end up as, they hope, if all goes well, flooring or cabinets or something like this. This is Acrocarpus. There's some windbreaks on there. Intercropping nitrogen-fixing species to improve the soil fertility. Actually, that was an interesting experiment. They ended up having to kill all the nitrogen-fixing trees before they became weeds, but I think they did improve the soils. Some in doing that. This is a Kona farm. That's an old picture, and that tree was about that big, but his rainbow bark eucalyptus is about that. So this is timber species above the coffee belt in Kona. Toon is a mahogany family. It's actually an Australian tree. Now I don't remember if I put that in or not. Most of our timber trees that people are growing are not native trees. So mostly it's either native trees or timber trees. You can do both on the same land, but mostly the same tree isn't going to do that. So the one on the right, that's his farm that I took just last year. This is his farm that I took about 15 years ago. The rainbow bark eucalyptus is a nice timber wood that people can sell those. The mills are very happy to buy those.
Is that Camilla's place? Is that Camilla's place?
Yeah, it's his dad.
Okay.
It looks like him now because it was an old photo, right? In fact, I met him, and then I met him later. He's like, yeah, I remember meeting you, but it was enough years ago that I didn't recognize him at all. This is a farm that it starts with a coffee mill where you go around, you taste the coffee. Above, as you go up, so it's Kona, above as you go up, there's a farm, coffee farm. Above the coffee farm, there's a tree farm. And at the top of the property, there's native forest. So it's got that different ecological zones. You guys know the ecological zones, you know, like Wauakua, Waukanaka? Why, you never have Hawaiian studies? You did? Okay. So what is Wau is like the region, right? So Waukanaka would be what?
Native region.
upside down. What is Kanaka? Kanaka's people, right? So Kanaka would be like where the people have their crops and stuff. Kua is what?
Oh, that's the plants.
That's the area where the gods are, the native area, right? So the Kona, the way that it works in Kona is you very much have the different regions, even in a single property as you go up. Oh, here's mahogany. That's why foresters like mahogany. It's what mahoganies like to do. They like to go straight, nice straight poles and stuff like that. These people have like integrated. They have tours and people go around in little golf carts and they have like little sculptures and everything in there. It's an easy to accessible place. It's up in North Shore and Kauai, so they're tourists. It's kind of a botanical garden around the tour, so it's like overly groomed. Forestry generally doesn't look like this. Oh yeah, I do talk about species selection. So we've got in Hawaii about 1,000 different species of non-native trees, about 300 of native trees, but there's not too much overlap between native trees and things you could sell. Koa is the big one. Sandalwood, do you know koa? Cordia subcordata. It's a coastal tree. It's a native coastal tree here. Hardly anybody's growing koa. It's very valuable. So if you have koa is the best thing for the Hawaiian umeke. Okay, guys, you know what umeke is? Umeke is the big carved bowl that the Hawaiians would have their poi, and they would use koa, not koa. Why would they use koa? Why would they not use koa for that?
Too hard.
No, koa is harder. Koa is not very hard. Koa actually imparts a bitter flavor. There are tannins in it that leach out. If you put wet poi in it, it would give it a bad taste. So koa was a favorite one. But most of the native ones that people are planting are not things that people are going to harvest economically. You're frowning. What else are you?
No, but I've heard Olakua might be, it's in the olive family. I don't know those.
Yeah, but I can't. Well, first, so if you went to any of the mills and said, so when was the last time you milled an Olakua tree? It would be never. Maybe could, but I'm just saying, is there a market for it? Whereas things like mahogany and pheasant wood, there's a market. If you said, okay, I got 2 acres of pheasant wood, people would buy it. So I'm just, thinking of it that way.
Ironwood?
Yeah, I just got an email about that. I'm not aware of anybody milling up or using ironwoods now. It's a real hard wood, hard to work with, and it's kind of got nice work, but I'm not aware of anybody using it. It's not a real. It's not an easy to use timber, so there's not much of a market for it. And unfortunately, because there's thousands of acres of ironwood coming in all over the place.
So it's something cabinets.
I've never seen it. I've seen it made into flooring. I've never seen it made into cabinets. Maybe, it could be. Someone could have done it.
You know,
Is
Ohia.
llama endangered?
Llama is not endangered. There's a lot of llama in the world.
In the world, but in Hawaii.
There's a lot of llama in Hawaii. And so, no, it's not endangered.
The Ohia is used.
So Ohia, and I will get to this the other half of the talk, but the main things Ohia is used for is flooring and for round wood construction. Ohia is actually very unstable. Have you ever tried to split Ohia firewood?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it does that. So when you saw a board, it goes as it dries, so it's unstable. Very seldom do you see Ohia make a cabinet or a table or something like that. Flooring, it's cut into pieces and it's nailed down. It makes perfectly nice flooring. And probably a much larger market is posts.
But very
Nice
marketable
architectural
as round. Very much a market for it as round.
The architectural post, yes, by the time you do a really nice post, it's a valuable product.
Not llama.
Llama isn't commercially harvested or used.
I've got someone that's been doing some work with it, and it's noticed that if you're not careful, you wind up with it rotting pretty fast.
Oh yeah? Yeah. I saw a turner at the Merry Monarch and he made llama bowls, because llama is a sacred wood for Hawaiians. They like have a block. I don't know the word for it. Okay, that's the word I don't know. What's the word that you put on the block on the table in the front of when you're doing hula? There's a block of wood that they use to like connect with nature. There's a word for it. Anyway, they use llama for that. So he actually turned some bowls for llama. He says miserable stuff to turn. They're all cracked. They're very difficult to work with. Yeah.
One more. Silver oak.
Silver oak's a great wood. It's allergenic, as you probably know. Most people cannot work silver oak because the sawdust gives them terrible allergies.
It's beautiful.
It's beautiful wood. Now, It's beautiful wood. It's a commercial species. If you can deal with sawing it up, there's a market for it. If you have a plantation of it, just as it comes in as weeds, it comes in thickets of little skinny trees, and that's not good for anybody. But yeah, silver oak. I just threw out some
I had a
examples
bunch
here.
of silver oak that was big, and I had great difficulty finding any sawmill that would touch it because
Right.
of the poisonous aspect.
Right. Most people, and some people are immune to it. You know, some people it doesn't bother, but other people would just really. So I knew a guy who would work with it, and he would do a respirator with an air tank. You know, an enclosed respirator, so you could work with it. Gloves, long sleeves, and enclosed respirator. Yeah, it's very allergenic for whatever reasons. People come with me. I want to do tree farming. I talk about what do you want? Do you want to integrate it with a farm? Do you want it as kind of an amenity, somewhere to live? Do you want to run ecotourism? I mean, this guy planted. This is Mike Robinson. I don't know if you knew it. He retired a year ago, but he's got a tree farm on the Hamakua coast. He built a house, rented out a house, but the house is in the middle of this tree farm. Do you want wood to go into your local the local wood products, you know, to put in your house? So this is Eucalyptus robusta. That's my floor that I had put in. That's when I first built my house 18 years ago. I didn't buy my house. I tore out carpets. I put eucalyptus flooring in. So it's nice. So, you know, something from the land to your house, if that's a value. What can grow? Obviously, here in Hawaii, we have snow and we have dryness and we have wet sides and all that. But if you're doing tree farming, then you've got to ask what you can sell. So if you had planted 5 acres of olupua and said, okay, I've got 5 acres of olupua in 40 years, what is it worth? A wood turner will take one, but most of the wood turners like free wood. So selling to wood turners is not a good bet. Guys that make flooring and sell posts, okay, those are the things you get. And you got it. And the way life works is the faster something grows, the less value it has. And that's just the way. It's not too wood. It's just the way, you know, something that grows really slowly, like sandalwood, is going to be the most valuable. Something that grows fast is going to be the least valuable. And so you have to do the economics on what are your returns are. The other thing with forestry, there's enormous economies of scale. So this is coal, Cordia subcordata, and this is an omeke made out of coal. So if you have a single nice big coal tree, people will pay you good money for that single tree because some turner will make bowls out of it, and those bowls will be hundreds of dollars each. We are struggling to sell eucalyptus, and there are 15,000 acres of it, and that's just barely enough to get a call back from a eucalyptus buyer because it's little amount, because you're competing with Brazil, you're competing with Chile, you're competing with huge countries around the world, and 15,000 acres is just a little bit, and it's hard. We're having trouble selling it. Conservation values. This is actually another talk, but I put it in here because I figured I gave a talk at the conservation conference about conservation values of people planting trees on their farms, not native restoration. And that's something else, and that's great. This is a different mahogany farm on Kauai. Whose is this? This is I can't remember what he did. Anyway, someone that made a lot of money on the internet.
Bill Porter. Porter.
Yeah.
Bill Porter.
Bingo. Thank you, Bill Porter. And what did he do that he made enough money to buy?
E-Trade. E-Trade.
E-Trade. There you go. See? Hey, great. Anyway, this is his, a couple of years ago, mahogany plantation. Soil protection, soil improvement. So this plantation, he planted nitrogen fixing plants to enrich the soil. Again, former cane land, so it was low nutrient and impoverished soils on it. Reading that. And this is carbon sequestration. So this picture, that first one where I showed you the guy with the shovel and the tree about his head, this is on his land now 15 years or so later on his eucalyptus plantation. This is tallow wood, which is a nice flooring, so local market species, and it's doing really well, So, these guys planted these trees in your carbon sequestration in control of invasive species. An awful lot of the Hamakua coast is growing up in weeds now, guinea grass, ironwood, all this sort of stuff. It's a fire danger. It's no good to anybody. People using the land in an extensive way, like tree farming, is controlling invasive species on it. And green space, open space. have something green used on the land.
What are they using for weed control? Is it canopy or are they using
Well,
animals?
where?
I mean, I just see very nice grass. Underneath mine, I'm pulling a bunch of weeds still.
Oh, this has got sheep. This is dense canopy. This was brutal work when they were small, with lots and lots of initially spraying and mowing and spraying and mowing and spraying. But now this is the eucalyptus tall enough that it's shaded it out. This was a lot of mowing work to get it down.
What's the spacing there?
Too close. This is too close. This is probably 8 by 8 foot. The consultant that did that.
Did they grow closely, so they grow taller?
They grow closely and they shade out. Your trade-off is whether you get how much time you spend weeding versus how much you get time spent thinning later. So if you put them close, it costs you more money because you have to buy more trees. But then they shade out the weeds sooner, so you don't have to do as much weeding. Weeding is hard. So normally, like for these guys on the right, the rainbow gum, I'd put them in at 10 to 12 feet, but I think they put them in 8 foot spacing. So this was too close. Actually, the consultant that originated this is no longer in Hawaii, thank goodness. But someone else took it over and tried to turn that ship around. I get a lot of forestry consultants, and anybody can call themselves a consultant. So I just tell them, talk to the last client that person had, and I hope that people's good reputation precedes them. And one of the other things that people are doing, and actually I could have used here, this is Dave Longacres. So have you met Dave? Any of these? Big guy, bolo head, real happy guy. Anyway, he, like you, is coming into, although he's in a commercial orchard, rambutan orchard, and is enriching with native things, because native things are cool. So he's doing both on his land, on that. And this was interesting to the conservation conference where I did this stuff. That wraps up what I was going to say on tree farming, because we need to get to Rapid Ohia Death, which is most of what I've been doing for the past couple of years. Any other questions on the tree farming side of things?
I've got some land 1,300 feet
Mm-hmm.
on a coffee run. But it's where I put it in a tree crop, sort of rocky.
Mm-hmm.
What do you recommend?
Where's the land? So the way I think about it, again, go back. What do you want to do? What is the environment? So on this island, we think of elevation, and that gives you a temperature regime, rainfall, and there are great maps of the island rainfall. But in general, okay, if you tell me where you are, I know what the rainfall is. Soil type, Makale, okay, and so dry side, and then soil type. Then what your goals are. If you want to sell things, what can you sell? If you want to do native, what is the native appropriate for that
Well,
area?
I want to have a commercial crop, but I know I'll probably be dead and gone before then.
So Makale, 1,300 feet is going to be pretty dry. See, and then so the last thing is it an invasive species? So silk oak grows great there, but silk oak's a real problem invasive species. It spreads all through.
Yeah,
So
I've got lots of silver.
yeah. So the silver oak is it would be great, except that it's an invasive species on that. So some of the other, for the crop. So in that you could put what?
Oh, come on.
1,300 feet.
It's going to line
You
it
put
for
code
two-
at
They're
1,300 feet.
climatic.
And they're
They're
trying.
climatic. They're like the Lugia, they can grow mountains.
Yeah, I
Plus,
have
the
other
growth
property.
pattern is different,
Yeah.
at different elevations.
I had some other property planted corn, I don't have property corn. And it did very well, and it
Yeah.
was probably 1,200 feet.
Okay.
Now, what about sandalwood?
Sandalwoods could grow there also. Sandalwood is so briefly, and we don't need to go on. Sandalwoods are nobody knows how fast Hawaiian sandalwoods grow. There's been no long-term research on sandalwoods. When they did, it was about 6 or 7 years ago. Someone started harvesting sandalwood in Malcolm Conan. There was a lot of hullabaloo, there were protests and everything about it. So people went back. Well, he made claims that we're harvesting 70, 75-year-old trees. Nobody could say yes or no because there's actually no data on how long. So planting for a commercial crop,
Varieties of sandalwood there?
there are
They go from Makai to Maka, different varieties.
worldwide there are about 24 species of sandalwood. In Hawaii, Hawaii, just Hawaii, there are 6, and there are 2 natives on this island. There is a coastal one and a montane one. And how much overlap there is, that gets to be interesting questions. So for you, I would put in the montane one. So if I owned land at 1,300 feet, I would at least put in a couple hundred sandwood to see how they do. And it would be fun. But if you planted something like a eucalyptus, there's a heck of a lot of data. You find out plantations, your similar climate, how much they go. You can calculate that. Sandalwood, you're just planting it on a wing and a prayer, because you don't know how fast it's going to grow. The Hawaiian sandalwoods are very valuable. The guys harvesting now are getting premiums above some of the other sandalwoods because they're very valuable. But we don't know what kind of how long it takes to grow their commercial crop.
Did you get the keys anyplace?
Okay, if anybody wants to get into it, again, I step back and step through goals and stuff like that. As far as seedling acquisition, there are about 15 nurseries statewide. And I always encourage people, rather than grow your own, to get them from a commercial nursery, has some experience growing trees. There are about 15 nurseries statewide, several on this island, who, if you put in an order for forestry, I'm saying for forestry, if you say, okay, I want to plant 5 acres, I want 3 acres worth of tallow wood and 2 acres worth of sandalwood, then you can do it. There are many, many landscaping nurseries if you want 1 or 2 trees. I'm talking about nurseries that if you're going to spend a couple $1,000s on seedlings to reforest land, there are about 15 statewide who can grow seedlings for you. So I'd be happy to talk with anybody about reforestation, about your land and what would be, but I wanted to talk about this talk, about the process of how I'm thinking about what you want to do. All right, we should move on to a fairly different topic. A connection with this is this is not a disease that scientists discovered by going out into the forest and saying, we discovered a disease. This was a disease that landowners who owned forests and saw their trees die and came to us with a problem. So it was, from the people who are on the land rather than scientists out discovering what the problem was in Rapid Ohia Death. This is Leilani. By now, we have a huge team of people working on this. The 2 main people, in addition to myself, are Lisa Keith, the USDA Ag Research Service, who is a pathologist, and Flint Hughes with the USDA Forest Service, who is a forest ecologist. And I'm sort of the general forester. So we were leading up the team, but we've had people from all kinds of different agencies, plus national. So right now there is a pathologist from the Forest Service from Minnesota and a pathologist from University of Iowa out working on this. And they are forest pathologists who do this on their diseases and their things. So they're teaching us what we do back home, and here's what makes sense for what your problem is. If you guys are interested in science projects for this, think about some of the remote sensing. In fact, just last week, and I haven't even slides from yet, I saw an hour's worth of remote sensing for Rapid Ohia Death. There's a heck of a lot of interesting progress being made on the remote sensing. This imagery, I got engineers here, does anybody do remote sensing? No. That's not part of it. Okay, this is the pictometry imagery. So this is sort of a sidelong looking. This is the same, the red dot is the same spot. This is the same forest at 4 years apart. What you see is a lot of trees dying. They're not all dying in a clump, they're sort of scattered around, but it's a discrete area of trees dying on that. This is a native ohia forest down below Pahoa on our island. On the wet side that I was able to visit, it was just a beautiful forest. It had llama in the understory, alahehe, and had endangered plants in the understory. It was on a sort of one of those cinder cones, so it was a nice large stature ohia forest. This is what it looks like today. The disease came through, has wiped out all but 1 or 2. That guy's still alive. I was there a couple weeks ago. Wiped out almost all 1 or 2. The weeds come in underneath, and basically we've lost that forest. What we started seeing and why we gave it this name Rapid Ohia Death is unlike other things like, I drove around the south today and go through Monocaw, and that Ohia's been on the decline for decades. But what people were seeing is the tree went from green to brown to the leaves falling off in 2 weeks. Things died very quickly. The symptoms, at least the outward symptoms, were that something died very quickly. It went from green and healthy to brown very quickly on that. Also, that beautiful large large trees. So it wasn't that's jargon, suppressed trees. It wasn't the ones that weren't getting very much light, or the ones that were like little skinny trees that didn't have good soil. It was the big, healthy trees were going down with us. Lisa led the field sampling when we finally discovered this. We did a lot of felling the trees, cutting them up. What we found is we found this black streaking in the sapwood of all the trees that had this disease. Let's see. In the pathology lab, which again, I'm not the pathologist, I'm the field forester. The pathology lab took it and they identified the fungus as Psoriasis, common worldwide pathogen. Two different ways. One by just the morphology, especially these little the little black spots, little spots with the little whip tail off them. Those are called perithecia. That structure is characteristic of that. But they also, Wade Heller also was able to do a DNA genotype of it with a molecular analysis and figure out what it is. So it turns out, so Psoriasis is the genus. There are many, many species, and there are many more that nobody's ever discovered or described yet. What the pathologists actually do is they describe a species when it starts causing a problem. So Psoriasis cacao funesta causes problems on what? You guys thought it wasn't going to be like school. It is like school. Yeah. If it's called cacao funesta, what plant do you think it's killing?
Chocolate.
Bingo, chocolate. It's the disease on chocolate. Psoriasis platani causes the disease on plane trees. It's a big problem in Europe. It's an American disease from sycamore. It didn't cause a problem on sycamore. It was there, no big deal. That disease went to Europe and killed the European sycamore, the plane tree. The two that we have on Ohia are not closely related. Two different species and new species. Lisa went to South Africa, compared our DNA to the worldwide library of about 1,000 species of Psoriasis, and they're different. So, okay, there's a lot more in this world that we don't know, but we have two different species here. And the curious thing is, one seems to have come from the Latin American group, Caribbean group, and one comes from the Asian group. So the Caribbean group is similar to the thing that kills plane trees in Europe. The Asian group is similar to a disease that is up here on taro, but our Psoriasis does not affect taro. The taro Psoriasis does not affect Ohia. There is a third one that has been here for a while on sweet potato. It was discovered in the 1940s, a black rot of sweet potato. It doesn't infect Ohia at all. It's not related again to either of these. So we have two new diseases. They must have come in on something, but we don't know where they come from because we haven't found it, which worries me because I'm worried they came in on some other plant and we keep importing this plant with this disease. It's a low-level disease. The inspectors don't notice it and it may still be coming in. This is a map of locations where we have diagnosed the disease. This isn't all the locations. After a while, I got too busy and I stopped putting dots on it. But basically, we started out seeing it down in Lower Puna. Why does everything come to Puna? Partly because it's a big nursery trade. People bring in a lot of plants there. And people bring in plants and farms here in Kona, like if you go down to right above the airport with all those farms, if they have a disease there, it's not going anywhere because it's just grasslands outside of it. Whereas all the nurseries in Puna are right next to the forest. The coqui frogs hop out and they're in the forest and the disease jumps to the Ohia, which is right outside the forest, and things tend to spread from there. So we started seeing it spreading from Lower Puna, across around up the Kona coast, and now up the Hamakua coast. So tomorrow I'm going up here to check out that area, which is a fairly new outbreak up on the Big Island. So this is a map of samples that we've taken into a lab and identified the pathogen in culture in the lab, of spots of wound in the lab. This is a map of trees that show the symptoms from the air. This is actually the 2016 map, and they weren't releasing the 2017 map, but I think I can get it. But it shows the same story. So the gray lines there are the helicopter flight lines, and what they do, this is one of the more high-tech, but it's kind of medium-tech, because one of the best remote sensing devices is your eye. So they fly over the forest, they have an idea what they're looking for, and they have a georeference tablet. So the tablet is showing imagery as they fly with imagery, and they just mark with a stylus where they see trees that are showing the symptoms of it. So in the re-inventory, This in 2016, they saw 47,000 acres that showed symptoms. And again, you remember that first pair of things? There was a discrete patch of trees. They weren't all dead, but there's a discrete patch that you could draw a circle around. This year, it came up to 75,000 acres of Ohia forest where it is showing, trees are showing the symptoms. And then we go back and we take samples from these. You know, we've got positives from here, we have positive here, here, here. So basically, most of these, some of these, like up here in Kohala, because we don't have any positive samples in, they went back to Kohala and it was something else. It wasn't this radicus killing here. So some of this is false positives. But basically showing you the same story, a lot of mortality in Puna, and then a good band up to south of Kona, as far up as Koloko. Nothing between Koloko and Waimea.
How many acres in total will be
On
on
the island, it's a good question, and I know that if I think for a minute.
here? What proportion of it is?
10%? 10% along there. So, yeah, 700,000 acres maybe. 10%. Okay, so this is the what they call the digital sketch mapping, flying over and looking at it. This is a much more advanced, I threw these slides in for the engineers. So this is Carnegie Airborne Observatory, Greg Asner. So this is an airborne LiDAR spectrophotometry plane. So this flies the island with LiDAR to do the topography. LiDAR does the topography and the structure, and the spectrophotometry does, well, what he can do. So when you look out and you can see kukui trees, right? You look out across the valley, you see kukui, because kukui reflects light differently. If you have a computer and enough wavelengths, you can tell every tree in the forest from every other different tree by how its wavelengths go. Furthermore, what you can tell is are trees water stressed or not, because you can look at the water signature on trees. So within a species, you can look at things like water stress on trees. Now, all your observations are geolocated, so then you know what the soil is, what the topography is, what the native cover is, and all those other things. So you can start asking a lot of really interesting questions. So here's the flight path of last year in January, and then he just flew it June this year. He reflew his flight path, all the Ohia forest on the island. And these maps are online, so if you want to play with these, so what he did is he mapped all the brown and dead trees island-wide on, so this is Leilani, looking out over it, and you can zoom into this map until you're talking individual tree level, every tree. So I mean, hundreds of thousands of trees mapped out. So now we got the funding to fly the plane is $250,000. So we flew the plane, we flew it again. Now we got to get funding to get people to sit there and crunch all that data to figure out what it means. But that's a real trove of data to try to figure out what are the ecological implications. Because sometimes this disease, it just devastates a forest. And sometimes it's just kind of there, but it's not really devastating. And the environment of the forest has something to do with it, but we don't know what. Nothing has jumped out like, oh, it only goes up to a certain altitude, or oh, it doesn't do something dry. But now with this amount of data, we're really going to be able to get at some of the reasons.
One of your pictures was of one healthy tree surrounded by dead.
Good.
Have you studied that tree to see perhaps it's something about it? Maybe it kind of triage. I think of things like, can you breed that tree to get trees that are resistant?
Yes. You can do tree resistance work. So where we are in that, yes. And the nice thing about Ohia is you can grow cuttings of Ohia, because if it's seed, if it's outcrossed, then you get half sibs. You could do it with half sibs, but of course it's a lot more work than if you do cuttings. So we are working on setting up, again, getting the funding to build the greenhouses and get the postdocs in. So I hired 5 people last year on Rapid Ohia Death stuff. So we got pathologists on just to understand the disease. But the resistance breeding and selection for it, we definitely think, boy, it does look like those are resistant ones. But the other thing is they could just be escapes. So you got to bring them into the nursery. You got to inoculate them and see with controls the other things. But absolutely. And the nice thing about Ohia, I mean, we can go out and we can say, okay, that one we're going to root some cuttings of that. We're going to root some cuttings of that and see. What we've done so far is just look at in natural populations of a couple different Ohia varieties, and some seem to be more prone to getting the disease than the others. So we had a grad student who raise 4 different varieties, inoculate them, and one of them has a lot less disease than the others do. So, okay, that's the first step. Oh, so this is the substrate there at Leilani. So this is a map you would overlay. This is overlaid of this back to the Carnegie remote sensing. Overlay, yellow is Ohia and the brown is stressed Ohia. So you can go right down into the, so you can sort of lay all these things and try to figure out on a landscape scale what is going on. And then the inoculated seedling in nursery is another scale of looking at things. I didn't get any of the drone things. There's some very interesting drone work. Now, this plane costs $250,000 to get the plane to go fly, and we've done it for 2 years in a row, but it's really expensive. A drone is really cheap. You can drive out the road and fly the drone back up and forth. Why don't we do this with a drone?
Plane's faster.
Plane's faster. It would take forever. Drones do something on a couple hundred acres. This is, hundreds of thousands of acres. Drones will do a couple acres. But the nice thing about a drone is you can go and do it every 2 weeks or once a month. So actually we have, for certain areas, we have monthly drone information on trees dying. And he's even got a little animation showing the trees dying in the forest as you go month to month on it. So we're using drones, we're using helicopters, we're using airplanes, we're using satellites. So a bunch of different remote sensing ways of figuring. Each tool tells us something about it. Drones are cheap, easy, but only small areas. Planes are expensive, you can only do frequently, but they give you a lot of area. Satellite, as long as you can pay for the imagery, you got satellite imagery, but you take what they got, you can't go target and get what you want.
Are the victims of Rapid Ohia Death, are those trees fitting commercial value? They're cut.
Once they die,
Yeah.
we have such an oversupply of dead Ohia wood now, the answer is pretty much no. If bioenergy were up and running and wanted them for bioenergy, that would be great, but it's not. And bioenergy isn't up and running. And I've given up speculating when and if they'll ever get their permits to run the mill.
I'm talking about furniture or flooring or anything like that.
Yeah, they could be done for flooring. One of the things about flooring is they do tend to get a lot of boring beetles, but there's one mill and it turns out a little bit of flooring. You have 1,000 times more wood supply than you have market for Ohia flooring right now.
But on the dead wood, though, you don't want to move it, right?
Right.
So that's
Isn't that too late because it's all over the island?
No, it isn't. And there are areas where there's like, actually, so the landowner I visited today in South Kona was asking about using firewood in your own, he had a nice fireplace and oven outside. Firewood in your own location, great. Posts on your own ranch, great. But I told him don't give it to your friend in Volcano. Don't give it to your friend in White Man. There's a little bit of disease in the Volcano, but we don't want to bring in more. So onto how it moves around. If you move around, so this is firewood. This is Ohia firewood Leilani. This was burned in a wood stove in Leilani. That's fine. But you see all that black staining there, that's all the fungus. This is what we don't want moved around to a place like Volcano or a place like Waimea. These are posts that wanted to go to build a house on Kauai, but by then the Department of Ag was onto this and they inspected and they found they were diseased. So they were not allowed to go to Kauai. And I don't know what happened to the posts, but they didn't move the disease to Kauai with that.
So this pathogen apparently is not airborne. You gotta actually move along.
That's this question. So moving a log definitely will do it. Moving a log, say you bought a log and you were in Colocomalca and you want a firewood, you cut it up and you blew sawdust into your own forest. That would be a great way to move it. The other thing that we see a lot though is we see a lot of ambrosia beetles drilling into the infected trees, and they produce this frass, this fine powder of it, that blows around. The fungal spores themselves are not airborne. So, but dust particles, because the beetles drill right in where the fungus is and blow it out, those dust particles are airborne.
Where'd that beetle come from?
Most of the beetle, so here's the beetle. It's this is the most common one, and it is. Where did it come from? This I don't know. The beetles that are generally hitting the infected trees are not native, so they came here in the past. Mostly they come in pallets, wood stuff. Most alien boring insects they're from somewhere else and they're in a pallet and they get shipped here and then thrown out and then they fly out in the forest. So out of the 15 or so species of ambrosia beetles they've isolated from Ohia, 2 or 3 are native and the rest are non-native.
Didn't they introduce a bug recently to kill guava trees?
Nope.
A few years
They
back?
introduced an insect which is a gall insect on leaves, and with that, the goal of that is to stop the guava from fruiting so much. It's not killing the insect, but that's a gall insect that is a leaf attacker. Not these are the ambrosia beetles. These are related to the black twiggy borer, but also the coffee berry borer. So it's the same family as a coffee berry borer. So these are things that move around globally and cause a lot of things. So the hypothesis is that the frass is also blowing around. You saw it in Puna. Next we saw it in Kau. That's the way the winds go. And then you all know that what blows out of Kau comes around the coast and wraps around and hits Kona. And that's the next place we saw the disease. So circumstantial evidence makes sense. There are people out now, they're using things that are like pollen counters. So I didn't know what pollen counters. They'd say, here's the pollen counter such and such. It's a little motor with a little whirligig and 2 glass rods that spin. And it spins for a set amount of time and it collects a certain amount of pollen or whatever, what have you on it. So they're setting those up around the island to see, are you actually seeing this stuff blowing around? The other thing is that when you dig under an infected stand and you dig in the soil, if the beetles have been active, if the beetles haven't been active, nothing big, but if the beetles have been active, you pick up live spores from that also. Management, don't move stuff around. In fact, the Department of Ag was very proactive on this. They put a quarantine on the Big Island for Ohia as soon as we explained the problem to them. They didn't wait for all the science and then it would go to all the islands, it'd be too late. They said, no, you can't move anything Ohia off the island unless it's been inspected and shown to be Psoriasis free. So, for example, this was another shipment of logs that the owner wanted to move them off the Big Island, and we found they had Psoriasis in them and they were not allowed to. I don't know what the people on the other end did. I think they used ironwood or something else for their buildings. Seedlings, you can't move seedlings off island. There's no way to inspect seedlings without killing them, so basically just the answer is no on seedlings. So don't move Ohia around. Don't wound trees. I came the south route today, and state is brushing the side with a big mower, and they're coming through and I understand, I don't have the solution for this, because they're coming through, because they got to go for miles, and they've got a big spinning head on the mower, and they come through, and mostly what they're cutting is eucalyptus Christmasberry, but occasionally there's an Ohia that they rip up there too. This fungus needs a wound to colonize. It won't land, it won't grow in bark, it won't grow in leaves, it needs a wound. But what I saw today with these things just taking big chunks of bark off trees, those trees I'm pretty sure are going to get the disease now and start spreading it to other trees. So these are areas like this was right up in Clocomalco. You can see the guy made the driveway, and the guy with the dozer dinged a couple trees. Those got infected. This one on the side there, you see how that was stripped? That was goats. That was down in Kau, and goats or something, goats or sheep or something, had stripped the bark off, exposing the bare wood. That bare wood was completely covered in fungus, killing the tree. So don't wound trees. Clean stuff off. So actually, and tomorrow morning, because I'm going to get home about 9 o'clock tonight, but tomorrow morning I'm going to go clean my vehicle, clean all your boots and stuff off from being when you're in these infected stands. So on this side, if you're up in the forest about an hour or something, we see trees dying all around you, there could be viable spores in the soil. Cleaning off boots, cleaning off shoes, and tomorrow I'm going to go pressure wash under my vehicle, because I go up to places like Wild Volcanoes National Park, Hockley Forest National Wildlife Refuge, that they really don't want the disease. So I really try to not bring any soil with the disease from one spot to another. Now, the fungus, it's a very successful, they're pathogens. I mean, they're Psoriasis species that attack coffee, cacao, and mango, and trees all over the world. One of the reasons they're successful is they have different kinds of spores with different lifespans. There's a hard-shelled kind of spore that can live for years. So we found trees 4 years old, 4 years dead, taking a slip of wood and being able to culture the fungus out of that. There are other spores that are sticky and stick to any kind of tool. So axe, machete, chainsaw. I took a sample today, and immediately afterwards I sprayed my axe and rubbing on the phone. For us, rubbing alcohol is the disinfectant of choice. You can buy bottles of it in CVS, 70%, squirt it on. It'll disinfect any cutting tool. A chainsaw, you gotta take apart, take the bar off, rust out. So if you cut a living tree, if you take, or pruning would be one good way to transport. So if you're pruning a tree and you move the same saw to the next tree, it'll move the disease to the next tree. This is how it moves around in plantation forests. We don't have the Psoriasis pathogen of eucalyptus, but if we did, when they prune the trees, they tend to move it tree to tree that way, unless they learn to sterilize their tools between. So cutting tools, what to do with infected trees. If it's in a new area, I want to know. So if someone has a tree like this in Kohala, right now, Big Island Invasive Species Committee are the guys charging around trying to find this. If Ho'oloa, Kohala, Pu'awa, we want to know, we'll go out there and see it. If it's in South Kona, yeah, I know the disease is there. I'm not going to go charging out after it. I say have the trees cut down. I don't like to tell people to cut trees down. I'm afraid someone's going to hurt themselves. Felling trees is dangerous. I felled a lot of trees. I've had a few close calls, and I know how to fell trees. I see a lot of people with chainsaws that have no idea what they're doing. It's very dangerous. So I tell people, have someone who knows what they're doing fell the tree, and just getting it down. We think these trees that are up like this are like beetle hotels. The boring beetles will get in and they'll spread around. Now, if you're in a forest where all your neighbors have the disease too, no big deal. Then if you're not going to make any difference there, just make sure the tree isn't going to fall, hit your house, or hit your wires. If you do have it and it's somewhere where it's going to fall the wrong way and hit something, it's always best to get it cut down as soon as possible. Not to wait until Murphy's Law kicks in and falls the wrong way. Firewood, it's great. We used to say burn them until we got scoldings from the farm master. He said, no, people just gotta go light that. You gotta tell them fireplace emu, yeah, they like that. Fireplace emu, do not just go light trees. And yeah, but you see what people do. He has seen a lot more. He was like, don't say that. People are gonna do it. It doesn't move in the smoke. Once you burn it, it's fine. Rapid Ohia Death.org is our website. We have our information, the current maps, talks a lot of other information on that. And we have a Facebook page for people who like to write questions on Facebook. There's a team of people who answer those, or pass them to people who can answer them. So those are a couple of ways that we try to keep in touch with people.
So is it still concentrated here on this island? It hasn't got off yet?
Hasn't got off the island. I don't have the recent number of how many dozens of samples that we've analyzed. And by we, I mean the pathologist, not me. Have analyzed dozens and dozens of samples from symptomatic trees on other islands, but other diseases. There are a lot of diseases out there. So, not on any of the other islands, only this island.
There was an item in the paper about a Korean, I believe, was strategy of exposing the Ohia trees to other pathogens that are not as dangerous but might cause the Ohia tree to develop more resistance to the problem.
Yeah, there have been some claims of that. The thing that kind of stops me together is they don't know what's in their formula that they make. They don't know what's in it. And on one day it's fertilizer, and another day it's medicine. So if they, as a scientist, you say to me, oh, I'll spray this, it'll cure tree. Well, how does that work? And that's the end of the conversation, because they don't know what's in that. They know there's a method of doing it. They go through a set of procedures, but what is in that? And they don't know. So I don't put much credence in that. If they were going to show it in a replicated, science experiment, we're okay. We're going to apply it to these. We're not going to. So the county council did fund them to do a trial, and I'm just kind of waiting to see if the trial is the sort of thing that's replicated, shows mechanisms, all the good things you want to do in science to see.
Is there a natural enemy of these beetles or spores?
Well, the beetles, there are some, but these beetles are really hard to control. Like you see with the coffee, there's the twig borer, which we've always had, but now with the coffee berry borer, the fungus that they're spraying, if they hit the beetle, the fungus will kill the beetle, but mostly it doesn't work because the beetle's inside the seed of the coffee. So the beetles are really difficult to control. Natural enemies of fungi, no. I mean, the thing that holds them in check is trees have defenses against fungi. So, for example, there's a Psoriasis of mango in India, problem in India, but some cultivars are resistant, some are not. And it turns out on the tree's physiology, on the cellular level or the organelle level, it's able to block it. So soon as the fungus starts growing, the tree blocks off all those vessels and doesn't grow anymore. Some cultivars, and this is just different between cultivars, some cultivars can't block their vessels off, and so the fungus goes right through the trees and kills it. So the battle with the pathogen fungi is the host battling against the pathogen. It's not really outside biocontrol sort of things, nor for the beetles. I mean, there are pesticides that kill beetles, but the ambrosia beetles are inside woods. You could only kill them if you could catch them when they emerge before they drill in the next thing. You know, the black twig borer. I mean, coffee growers control black twig borer by pruning the affected things and getting rid of them, but there's no spray to control the twig borer.
I guess I have two questions. One of them is, when you have an affected area, how long do you wait then to replant and try to bring that forest back?
Good question. I am encouraging people to continue planting Ohia, and this is some results I didn't get to. One of the things that we're finding is that smaller trees are much less prone to getting the disease. So things that are less than 15 centimeters have a much lower disease rate of larger things. And we think that goes back to the wounding. A bigger tree is more apt to have a broken branch or something else that was a wound for. It was a small, flexible tree, it's not. So even though we don't have any real inkling of what might be resistant or not, but still planting more Ohia trees is good. One of the other things, though, is we're working on is a guide, and we're trying to make it simpler than the NRCS guides of good other things to plant. So if you are managing land that's got affected on it, planting Ohia, but planting more of the things like Mahogany, it's going to keep, and really the trick is to keep the weeds down. A lot of the forest that has been hit now, the weeds are coming in so fast that it's toast. Even where I was today, it was Christmas berry, well, it was rose apple underneath, but it was ginger, it was Christmas berry, everything else coming in under it. So it's pretty much, unless there's some heroic intervention on that, that's pretty much just going to be a weed patch. But other forests are still mostly native, and you can keep planting natives. So if I were in Kona side, I'd want to put in some Mamaki, but also maybe Olapua or something. Puna side, I would put in some Ohe Malka in addition to the Ohe Malka and Lama, in addition to Mamaki and some Naupaka Kuhiwi or something like that.
Are there nurseries we could start setting these programs up so that the people that work in them can start to bring that out to the public more? And I've talked to some of the people in the nurseries and they've said, oh yeah, people are asking more about native plants. So there's some people that are starting to put that momentum out there in their nurseries to start cultivating more native plants and more native species, but some of these names that you're saying I've never heard before. So how do we get those?
Yeah, the bottleneck isn't enough nurseries. I mean, any business is a chicken and egg sort of thing. So yes, are hundreds or thousands and up and up. I mean, they can gear up and do 10,000 seedlings for something. Landscaping nurseries, the landscaping industry is a whole nother thing, and they're the leaders in the landscaping industry are really trying to push natives. But there's a lot of, nope, we just want to sell bougainvillea and fire trees because that's what we know how to sell, and we don't want to do anything else. There's a lot of stick in the mud with the landscaping. With forestry and conservation, yes, there are good nurseries. There are half a dozen good nurseries on this island that can produce. But there are other things like, and this is one of the things. Some of the people recommend things, but then they're not available in the market. So, you gotta think of your recommendations. What things are available in the trade, and some things are just not available. And never mind the endangered stuff. But some things are just not available because they're like hard to propagate. Nobody can get the seedlings. But there are other native things that are. So one of the things that we're working on in cooperation with the nurseries is a simple, like half a dozen list. If you're Kona, North Kona, South Kona, Puna, Hamakua, what else could you put in? If you're losing some of your Ohia, what else could you put in? And we're working with the nurseries on that because we want to make sure it's something, if you take that list to a nursery, they're like, yeah, we can grow these things for you. But there are those nurseries out there. How do those nurseries get the word out that, yeah, we have these things for people? That's a good question. They do go to fairs and open houses and whatnot for it. And they're on every island. And nurseries also ship inter-island. Like a lot of our plants for restoration here are grown on Maui. Maui Native Nursery is a really good production nursery. So people collect Mahogany seed here, ship it to Maui, they grow out the seedlings, see them come back.
We're cautioned not to move Ohia,
Yep.
and now you're saying to plant Ohia. How do you plant them if you can't move them, or are they certified trees you can move?
How do we ensure that Ohia seedlings aren't carrying the disease is a good question. It's not in the seed. Most nurseries will grow it all nurseries, all reputable nurseries grow it in a soilless mix, so it won't be in the soil. So I'm pretty confident that Ohia seedlings are not going to be moving the disease around. Within island. Between island, again, we're trying to stop it from going other island. So nobody's shipping Ohia seedlings off island. But I wouldn't worry too much about getting an Ohia seedling from one of the on-island nursery and planting it out somewhere. I think I would watch it, but I think you're on pretty solid ground for that.
Okay, another question. Once a tree is infected, is that pretty much the whole tree? You can't prune it back?
Okay, that's a longer answer. Remember I said there were two diseases? Well, it turns out that one of the diseases, and this is, we did some inoculations around January and just did the cutting up the trees. One of the diseases in January to April, the pathogen moved from the ground all the way to the tip in 3 months. So when that kills a tree, Mahogany dead, it's gone. The other one, B, what we're calling B, it only moved this far. So if there's an infection in a branch and you see the branch die, or maybe it's even the top of the tree, but the pathogen itself, it forms a canker, a necrotic area about that big. Eventually, it will go around and girdle the tree and kill it. But if you cut off that piece, maybe the rest of the tree will still be good. So because people are saying, oh no, I cut it off and then the tree recovered. Well, likely that's the B species that forms a localized canker rather than the A species, which is a true vascular wilt, which goes through the whole tree quite quickly.
So, corky frogs, little fire ants, and now Rapid Ohia Death all came in to the nurseries in Puna from a shipment of plants coming in from Central America.
Well, we don't know that. We don't have the smoking gun.
That's the working
Cokies and
hypothesis.
fire ants, we have the smoking gun for.
Yeah. Call that the working hypothesis. And has anybody gone and done a cost-benefit analysis of the value of continuing to import tropicals from other places and the costs of the damage that these diseases are?
People have done parts of it. I will tell you that the nursery industry is very organized, and our representatives very much don't want to cross the nursery industry. This year, the state is working on a biosecurity plan, trying to do a lot of things to make it so, and there are a lot worse things out there that we don't have. So we really need to step up our game. The nursery industry was fighting it because it would mean more inspections, more cost to them. I think they were the only people fighting increased biosecurity.
But more profit to them if they've got an exclusive market.
They like to bring in plant stuff. They like to bring in plants. I think if I were king, there'd be no more plants brought in. Okay, we got the
Listen,
plants.
by accent, where I come from, you can't bring anything.
Yeah. But we need, yes, absolutely agreed. We need better biosecurity. We need to at least inspect everything, for goodness sakes, as we get all these things. So
why isn't there a cry, out there to stop all these things from coming in? Who do we knock
you know,
the doors
I
on?
could say contact your legislators, but the Big Island legislators get it. Like rat lungworm disease, right? We've had it for what, 15 years? And it wasn't until some tourists in Maui got it that Honolulu cared.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
so much stuff.
why do we have to knock those?
Encourage our representatives who are trying to get these things through. I mean, Russell Ruderman was out there trying to get these things through. The ledge appropriated nothing for Rapid Ohia Death this year. A bunch of these things died right at the end of these things. Department of Ag is on it. They want to do it, but once you get to Honolulu, it just doesn't rise to the level of what they worry about.
So how do we make them worry about it?
I think encouraging our legislators, and when it comes through, writing testimony. I mean, there were 5 or 6 bills for Rapid Ohia Death, but none of them got funded.
no one knew. So how do you get the word out and say in
Well, there was
in your
testimony
Facebook
posted.
page, we need
Absolutely.
you know, the cry goes out.
So
you know?
absolutely, I mean, I give a talk like this once a week maybe, to many different people, but then it's gotta go out from other people about these things. I mean, and this is just part of biosecurity. You know, the little fire ants, and what I hear from all the other islands though is, it's only the big island, so it's not a problem. Yeah, I hear that a lot. And that's
a lot of
It's
inexcusable.
only by the grace of the Department of Agriculture, which is probably one of the most significantly understaffed, state.
And when they had the recession, they cut the inspectors. I mean, that's, so that's stuff. I've been encouraged, I mean.
If an alert has to go out, who do you alert? You know, if you alert the public, how does the public receive the message that this alert needs to go out? And you need the public to push, because if the public doesn't push, the representative don't move. And it has to be pushed by the public, I mean,
Yeah.
you can't do it by your department alone. You can't do it
Right,
by the
right, right,
agriculture department. It has to be the village that has to make the loudest noise, so that the ears are listening. Because if the public themselves don't make the noise, then the ears don't have to listen to anything. So how do you get the message out to the public that you need this support from the public, so that they can hear us?
And I think the way it's gotta go is it gotta go to 15 people times 15 times 15 out that way.
So how do you get the news to the people?
The person who knows that answer will be president.
Well, and I think, I really feel like we've got the support here on the Big Island. I feel like we don't have the support in Honolulu. We had last fall, we had a day in the Capitol, all the scientists talking about Rapid Ohia Death.
You see, that's not the public. You have the expertise, you have them talking, they have their PhD, educational background, but it's not the public. It's not
Right.
John Q. Plantation from Hamakua, it's not Richard Hoff from his farm who's over there, it's not the marijuana growers, they're not talking about it. You know, you need the public. It's getting the news
And
out to the
I think
public.
we've got the public on this island. So last month we had we sponsored a hunt in Nanavali and had an environmental aim for a lot of things. And there was ants and there was and a lot of things. But I mean, it started with Rapid Ohia Death, hunt for the forest. And we got the pig hunters in Nanavali and Lower Puna. So we're getting to them too. But the apartment dwellers in Honolulu, the apartment dwellers in Kona. Again, I don't know. So I didn't start out this talk talking about Ohia. I probably should have, being here. I get used to talking in Puna where everybody knows what Ohia is because it's a thing, but I didn't talk about why Ohia is important. But I probably should have for this group. But
Would randomly planted Ohia trees in areas where there are no others possibly create a reserve to keep this species healthy?
way down the line, yes, for example, especially some of the rare genotypes that we're concerned about, there is a genotype that only exists in gulches in Hilo Hamakua. So one of the things that we're doing sooner rather than later is seed collection. So we've divided the state into ecological zones and different populations of ohia, and have been collecting seed throughout the state and storing ohia seed. You can put in a foil packet, suck the air out, freeze it, and keep it for decades. So in terms of holding onto the genotype, we've been doing that. But the live population is something. You got to do that for plants that you can't store the seed, but ohia, fortunately, we can store the seed quite well.
Mature ohia trees, 100 years old?
Oh no, 600-700. The biggest, oldest ones. So my friend who works in Hakalau Forest, he's interested in bird habitat, but the birds love to nest in the biggest ohia, and he wondered how old they were. So he measured, I think, 1,400 trees, and he came back 7 years later and measured them again, and did a modeling exercise of how much a tree of each different diameter class tends to grow. Back calculated that the biggest trees were over 600 years old. So he said that the oldest hardwoods in North America, which, okay, we're not North America, but they're still, that's way older than any oak trees and whatever else. You know, the conifers get even older. And then he did some carbon dating, and it's a big spread in the carbon dating, but it roughly fell in the middle.
So the prognosis really is terminal right now, because the spread is uncontrollable right now. We don't have means to eradicate the disease. We don't have a means to control other than to slow the spread. But given how slowly the tree grows, basically our only hope is to develop resistant strains. And we
No, there are a couple other, so that's one. So there are three things. First of all, the disease does tend to be episodic, and the spread of it seems to be a combination of insects, pathogens, wind damage to trees. I think we've just gone through a period of a particularly bad episode, and I think things are going to level off. So I don't think it's going to be straight. I think it tends to be episodic. Secondly, the environment. There are areas where the disease occurs, but it's a bad environment for the disease seemingly. And again, we've only got 2 years of tracking this, now 3 years of tracking this. So we're trying to figure out what's going on in a lot of ways. But in a lot of areas, it seems that, well, the disease will be there, but it's not causing a huge amount of mortality, like Ocean View. The disease is in Ocean View. We've got positives, but I was looking as I drove through Ocean View today, and it's only a little bit. It's not like that. Puna is the worst environment. So there are environments where the pathogen will cause a lot of disease, and other environments that won't. Third, I think there will be significant amounts of resistance in this great diversity of Ohia. So those are three reasons to be optimistic about. I'm sure Ohia is not going to go extinct. I'm also sure we're going to lose tens of thousands of acres of native forest. I think it is going to be yet another problem, but one that we will be managing.
So is there any natural enemy of this fungus? I mean, something that you found chemically or something that there is synthetically that will attack the fungus? I mean, is there some methodology that the science that you have right now looking into such a fungus that something can take care of it?
And again, ceratocystis is a problem in terms of once the plant's dead, but in terms of something that's going to biologically control the fungus, no, it's really much more on the resistance to the host side. Now, are there, and again, my usual talk is at least an hour on Rapid Ohia Death, and we can do a full day symposium on it too. Now, there are fungicides which will arrest the growth of it. So it's actually related to Dutch elm disease. One of my other slides is one of my college buildings with the elm trees over the library. And those elms get injections of fungicide every 2 years. They drill holes and they pump it in, and the trees have the disease, but the disease is held in check by pumping fungicides into it.
Is that something that could be done to the
It could be. It could be done. So where we are now is we know what fungicides will stop the growth on a petri dish. How do we get them into the tree? Does it work in a tree? So petri dish and a tree are different. And then how do we get, just because it works in an elm, the whole structure of an elm is very different than the structure of an ohia. So maybe that could be something down the road where if you had a significant tree that you cared for in your yard or whatever, a culturally significant tree, you could go drill it and pump some fungicide in and do it every other year. Oh, it's time for treatment. We're going to treat this tree.
Is it something that can be brought up from the root system?
It possibly could be, but it generally hasn't been
Because I'm not sure
effective.
if Ohia has deep roots or shallow roots.
Yeah, I mean, that's very much a soil dependent thing. But the application is a injection where you drill the hole and put it in general for these kind of fungicides for this kind of disease has been much more effective than drenches. But both the techniques that have been at least tried. So if we get, but again, I mean, I don't know how many decades it took them to figure out for what they can do for the Dutch elm disease. I know they've been working on it since the 1940s. So we've been working on this since 2014, and they've been working on it since 1940. So yes, started some work on that. We've started some work on that too.
But when you're talking about a huge forest and thousands of trees,
The
that's
fungicides are going to be for individual trees that you are going to go treat. I mean, I can even see it being a tool in the arborist toolkit. You know, I do tree service. We remove trees, we treat trees. You know, you're going to go do them. Or if you've got a row of ohia trees down an avenue, go treat those.
So the trees that are cut that has this fungus on it,
Yeah.
it cannot be treated to kill the fungus that is in the tree. Soak the wood in a bath or anything like that.
Oh, so that's another question. Can you treat the wood so you're not moving it? Now, heat and dryness kill the fungus. So if you mill lumber and kiln dry it, will kill the fungus. The wood's good to go. For milled lumber, so flora. Now, for roundwood though, for a post, we don't know any way yet. However, we shipped a bunch of logs from here from Maui, so we don't move around the pathogen. to a mill on the mainland who was doing treatments of heating of logs of oak, because oaks get psoriasis also, so they do ways of treating oak. Ohia is not the same with oak. I don't know what the results are so far, but they were going to start treating the wood to see, are there economical ways of heating and killing the fungus in a log, so you could move Ohia posts there. So starting that research, yes. Any other questions? Okay,
Sounds like they
very good.
got it all.
Okay.
Go for it.
When we were looking at certain ideas of resolving this in some way or helping with this, getting it out to the public, is there any kind of organization to do with these nurseries that are so exposed so much more to the public and just growing ohia and having a certain percentage of those ohia that are sold to people in their private homes or whatever, but just so that consumers here on the island, there's so many people that are coming here all the time that you've never heard of this. It just seems like something like a plant store would be a good place to have just a little section over here. Is there a way to have some type of organization or organize funding from those sales or funding from things like that, so people are at least exposed more?
Yeah, those are good ideas. I got to think about how we could get the nurseries and more awareness.
You can get funding from the Hawaii Bay.
Actually,
Because you're talking about the influx of people coming here with no knowledge.
Hawaii.
HVB will fund your project.
I actually have a postdoc on Hawaii Tourism Authority funding right now, and it's September 30th. But so far, he's been cranking away on Hawaii Tourism Authority. And I haven't gone through the thing. We have had funding from state, federal sources, but also from Haole Maloa Foundation, Hawaii Tourism, Gordon and Betty Moore, Hawaii Invasive Species Council, a lot of private also. Also, we have a UH Foundation account for these smaller things. Even Kona Brew last week unveiled a Lehua lager from Kona Brew, and if you go by and drink Aloha lagers, they make contributions to it from that. And Blue Ohia on the bottle. So last week I met the artist, and if I didn't have to drive back to Hilo, I would trot down there and see if they promised me they'd give me free brews if I went down there and the brewmaster. But yeah, getting it out, getting to nurseries. But what I would do on it is end of the month in Hilo now, we're having there's an Ohia festival at the Imilo in Hilo. And that's the kind of thing that's going to get in a couple thousand people from the community. Now that's Hilo, that's not Kona. Kona is going to be very different. But yeah, that sort of thing to try to do.
And that's when you need to say, kind of have to go out and say we need your support in legislation, because people don't know to give you support.
Right.
And if you only have scientists and your department and that's it, you don't have the public supporting you.
Oh, and when I do testimony,
have
I
a
take
voice.
off my scientist hat. I'm just JB Friday and Blue doing that.
No, but you need the public. You need organization. You need the Hawaiian Civic Club. So
You need to
association.
So one thing that we did get huge support was from Mary Monarch. Last year, when this all came about, the Kumus decided they would not use Ohia in their one for Mary Monarch because of this would draw attention. So in that community, in the Hula community, it's going out with that very good support.
So now you need the Hawaiian Civic Club Association.
Civic Club Association. I know one person with that, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've talked to them.
Because they can pass legislation. And if your 5 legislation didn't go through, pass it on to the Hawaiian Civic Club Association.
Okay, well, that's a good idea. I will follow up when whatever shows up next year, when we get back in the silly season.
And I'll get back to you on the vaccine cover with the dual project and all that.
Okay. Okay.
Right on.
All right.
Start planting with them.
Great. Well, thank you.